Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Doctor Who, as well as the latest episode of Class. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So for example, if you want to hear what I have to say about this week's episode of Doctor Who, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Class. But the first thing we're going to talk about is this week's episode of Doctor Who. Another fantastic episode. It's kind of like, as the way Bill kind of puts it, this is kind of her first, like, proper adventure. Obviously, she did a little time traveling, world traveling, slash world traveling last episode. But this time, she's doing it the more proper way. This is the more proper adventure. And what I really appreciate is, like I said, I don't remember if I brought this up last episode, but I'm sure I kind of typically bring it up a lot. Granted, I don't know if I've brought it up in any recent recording, but the fact is, I have not seen the earlier seasons of Doctor Who in a while. I've only seen them all respectively one time. I'm pretty sure I did bring this up last episode. The only ones I've ever seen multiple times is 5 and 6. But, so I might not be remembering it clearly, but Bill, has the most interesting approach to, this whole situation. Because she asks the most questions. Because I feel like a lot of people typically don't ask a lot of, they ask questions, but it's like she asks a lot of the questions immediately. Everyone else kind of finds out stuff a little bit later on as they spend more time with the Doctor. It's like she's kind of getting all of it out of the way in the second episode. Finding out in this episode, oh, you have 2 hearts. Wait, what? You have 2 hearts? What's that all about? Then also bringing up the fact is that okay, so why is the TARDIS set up the way it is? Why do you have these seats yet they're not actually close enough to the controls for you to actually sit down and control it? Didn't you ever think about putting them close? And he's like, honestly, I never thought about that, because I don't think anyone's ever brought that up before. Something I've never thought about before, because obviously he's always standing, and it's just oh, you've accepted it that way for so long, and it wouldn't make sense, and it is technically a ship, so obviously it would make sense to just have a seat there, but something you don't really think about. And I think that's just kind of the genius of it. Just like I said, I brought it up last time, every new companion kind of has to one up the other one and just kind of being introduced to everything all at once. But like I said, Bill questions so much because obviously in this episode we deal with basically there's what we end up finding out later on is a colonization type of situation. Earth basically went through some stuff, and basically they're they're building a colony on this new planet, and basically they set up this whole system ahead of time. They built all these machines and robots, and obviously there's a group of people there to kind of make sure all the machinery is working, that everything's going smoothly, to make sure that the planet is ready and hospitable for, Earth members to come. But then the robots start killing people off. So basically the concept of this episode is smile or die. Because basically the moment these things see that there's some kind of distress or you're not happy, they start killing you. Because obviously the main ones behind it is the slightly more robotic robots, and then there's the micro robots, because in Bill's words, she's those micro robots, it's come on, those aren't robots, those are just sad. And she's okay, then these are proper robots. And I love the fact is that their language is told through emojis. It's the one language that Earthlings could pick, and it's we choose emojis, and it's just, I guess that's our definitive language. If on an off chance there's ever any other species that came across these robots, it's oh, Earthlings, they talk through smiley faces and stuff like that. But it looks cute, but also obviously very sinister, especially when they kind of get those faces kind of they had the squinty eyes, almost okay, this is suspicious kind of look on your faces. I thought that was kind of obviously that was the first step to him going oh, now it's time to kill everyone. I mean, the whole situation gets a little complicated because obviously the Doctor initially thinks okay, what this is all about is obviously these robots were here to obviously colonize the place. But the fact of the matter is later on, obviously, because initially he's I gotta blow this up because what is going to happen when the Earthlings get here? And it's this situation is the moment you're not happy, they start killing, and it's that's going to be a mass extinction of the human race, especially because this is the last of the human race coming here. So basically he's I gotta blow this place up. But then Bill ends up discovering oh, it's not there's just the people that were here keeping the machinery set. All of humanity that's left, it's in basically in cryostasis to be woken up once everything was said and done. So they're already here. So he can't blow it up, because if he did, he'd be killing the last of humanity too. So But then he starts slowly understanding why the things have been doing what they've been doing. It seems that basically these things were programmed basically for a satisfaction reading. It's like they're meant to keep humans happy and essentially healthy, essentially. And that's what they use, the little badges that basically you're not allowed to see your own like mood, because obviously if you did, like, and I just like the whole concept of that, because if you did, obviously it would influence it, because if you see like, oh, I'm sad, but obviously it wouldn't be a true good reading, so they make it so that every time you flip it over trying to see what your mood is, it actually flips to the other side so that you can never see it. And when you wear the badge, it automatically goes on your back. So, I mean, Bill, once again, just showing you how different Bill is. Like, everyone would be kind of like, oh, weirded out, but she immediately jumps at. She's like, oh my god, this is so amazing. It's like, oh, like, what if you like someone? It's like you can immediately tell if they feel the same way to you. All you have to do is look at them, like, oh, you totally like them, because you always know what's on someone's mind, whether they really would want you to or not. So, but the doctor ends up explaining that basically these things, Davardi, do not understand grief. They were programmed to only understand happiness. And so when they see that, like, oh, like this lady, like the lady there, like the lady that Bill ends up finding, like she was the first one to die, and then they saw someone being sad, and they're like, wait, that's not happy. You're meant to be happy. Oh no, you're going to basically pollute everything that's here. That basically, it's almost like they treated it like a virus. It's like, oh, you're just going to spread this, so it's like you got to be taken care of, which they in turn basically use the micro robots to basically eat you. And then, well, basically they eat your flesh and then use what's left of you as fertilizer for the food that, because of the whole process of like, oh, building a nice sanctuary for humanity to kind of like take refuge in, to make this their new home and everything. And it's like, it's kind of sad that, I mean, and even the doctor kind of brings it like how like they're not bad creatures, these robots that the humanity built. It's just they built them in a way where it's like, they don't have a complete understanding of human emotions. They know happy, but they don't know what grief is. They look at grief as like it's like, oh, that's anti-happy. We need to eradicate anything that could be considered anti-happy. They don't know that grief is like the proper response to losing someone. So that's why they slowly killed everyone that was there to kind of act as maintenance for the ship. So obviously the Earthlings didn't take this well. I mean, the doctor tried to explain, it's like, oh, they're doing this because they're not pro. It's like, I don't care. They killed the people we cared about. And so they obviously responded in anger. But then like upon the humans attacking, the robots kind of got angry and kind of did retaliation too. Side note, completely like forgot to bring up the fact is that the entire place is built out of those micro machines. I thought that was so cool, because at one point I figured that was a case when you see a chunk of the building like break off and turns into micro robots. Every building within the walls is made of them. So that was just kind of cool. And so the doctor like realized like the fact is that they were angry, like they understood the concept of vengeance and retribution. It's like, you've reached a level of intelligence that makes you're your own species. You're not supposed to be. So basically to keep, one from eradicating others, in this particular case, the robots from killing the humans, because the humans are literally the last of humanity. And he's like, they outnumber you, but the humans are, as rightfully so, it's like they lost the people they cared about. And it's like, they're super pissed. So the doctor does an interesting thing. And he ends up telling this story of basically a guy that made a wish. It's one of those situations where it's like, be careful what you wish for. He wished to have his son back. And basically it was like 100 gold or something like that. Basically, the wish ended up turning out, hey, your son's here in a body bag, because he wanted his son to return from the war. And he did, but he was dead, and got 100 gold from like the king or something as compensation. So the third wish was basically, most people are like, oh, I'd wish for an infinite number of wishes, more wishes to kind of, fix everything, like to change everything, to fix everything. But for him, it's like, no, rather than do that, like the thing is to just make it so that those previous wishes never happen. And so the doctor kind of takes that concept and does it with the robots. He wipes their memories, gives them a fresh start. It's like, hey, from here on, you're your own people. You're not like, I wiped their memories from knowing everything they've known. Like, to them, they're waking up and it's like, oh, this is like they've been awoken for the first time ever. So they don't know who the humans are. They don't remember what they've done to the humans. They don't remember that the humans built them and stuff like that. It's like, hey, you're a brand new species. This is your world. You basically helped build it. And it's like, you are the humans. As Earthlings, you are here on their planet. They kind of colonize. I've struggled with that word this entire recording. I apologize. I could easily cut those out. I'm not going to. I'm going to leave that struggle in, because that's going to teach me to kind of enunciate my words better and just learn how to properly speak from now on. So that'll teach you, future Michael. which future Michael is going to look back at past Michael, the one that's recording this right now, is like, you suck for doing that. Nevertheless, so basically, it's like, hey, you want things to work out. It's like, hey, this is their world, but hey, if you play nice, you can start kind of occupy this world too. So kind of make it as kind of your be the case. I don't know. Only time will tell. So. But another thing that kind of separating Bill from most people is like she's asking why, like when the time came and they were running from the facility, it's like, the robots aren't going to chase you because you're no longer there, so they're no longer inside of the building, so it's like it's no longer their concern. And so she's like, okay, let's get out of here. But the doctor wanted to go back and deal with the situation because of like what it would mean that if the Earthlings came there and basically the machines would end up killing them and wiping out the last of humanity. And she's like, why are you doing that? That's not your problem. And he's like, because she's trying to understand him, and she's like, I kind of get you. You act like... And it's so, like... The fact of the matter is that, for her, it's like, this is a situation that doesn't involve you. You're like a time traveler and stuff like that, but that doesn't mean you have to get involved in this because it's not necessarily your issue. I mean, that's the thing. It's not his problem to deal with, but he felt obligated to interfere. And so she's like, oh, call the police or something. Which I love his response of basically like, oh yeah, stay here and do not look through my browsing history. It's like, what has the doctor been looking at that he doesn't want anyone to see? I'm very curious what would be on the doctor's browsing history. But also she started thinking about it. She's like, oh, the reason why you want to call the police and stuff like that is because you are a police. Because she kept wondering like, okay, if it's, okay, obviously it's stuck as a police box, but why not change it? Why not ever get that fixed? It's like, you've left it that way. He's like, I didn't leave it that way. I don't want it that way. But it's like, obviously you do because you've never bothered to try and fix it. It's like, because you are the police. You put yourself out there. You even have a note basically like, oh, call for help if you need assistance or something like that. Because it's like, you're kind of a hero. And he's like, I'm not. She basically referred to him kind of almost like a space police essentially, which he obviously denies and everything, which is like, I don't know, it's so interesting because on so many levels to me that she ends up pointing some of that stuff out because it's like, to me, when I initially met, obviously when we met the 12th Doctor, Peter Capaldi's Doctor, it's like, he seemed like he didn't care. To me, that was the whole point of Clara. Like I brought that up before, that Clara was supposed to be kind of like his conscience to be like, oh, don't do this and do that. But it seems like, I guess without Clara, like, I mean, I guess it's always ingrained in him to want to help people, but it's like, you look at him in like season 8, and it's like, he definitely never really, it's like, if Clara had never really told him like, oh, we should help these people, he went about things his own way. So it almost seemed on an occasion, he was, it was always a fear, like, am I uncaring? Do I not really care now that I'm a different person? Have I always been like this? And is this version of me just a lot more honest about how I really feel? Just certain, like, almost existential questions kind of came up like that. And so, but you see this, he went out of his way. And he also kept Bill out of trouble because at one point she's like, oh yeah, let me take a picture of this map. And he's like, oh, it took you this long to realize to take a picture of a map. She's like, you memorized the map the moment you saw it and you told me to stay here and read it so I'd stay out of danger. He's like, yep. It's because he doesn't want her involved. Because I think on some level, everything that he's ever lost is making him be like, yeah, I'm trying to keep you as far away from this as possible. That's why he even told her to wait inside the TARDIS so she wouldn't be near all this, because a lot of people get hurt when they're around him. It's like, it's all fun and it's all fun and games, but the fact of the matter is people seriously get hurt. And the fact of the matter is, for him, it's like you always want the company, but at the same time, he fears getting close to people because he doesn't want to lose them all over again. So it's quite the conundrum. At least to me it is. And another interesting story element that was brought up in this episode is when Nardo kind of pops up. He's like, well, you weren't planning on doing it on off-Earth like travel or something. He's like, no, I wasn't. He's like, good, because you remember your oath forbids you from doing that. He's like, okay, sure. And even Bill asked him about it later. It's like, okay, what's this whole thing about the oath? He's like, okay, so basically something happened, and because of that something happening, I made a promise that I would never leave Earth. And so like, also that something also involves a vault, doesn't it? He's like, yes. But she's like, you leaving it unguarded? He's like, no, I'm not, because of the whole time travel thing. Obviously, I'll be back in time, which it's like, at this point in time, you would think that you wouldn't think like that, because you're always wrong. It's the best example is the whole Amy situation. You're like, oh, Amy, I'm gonna come back and get you. And it's like, you were a little girl at that point. It's like, oh yeah, come back. I was only going for a couple seconds. At least to me, it was only a couple seconds. Come back. You're a full grown woman. So obviously examples like that would teach you like, yeah, kind of don't put your foot in your mouth type of situation, which the Doctor loves doing that. I mean, also because the fact of the matter is he doesn't 100% quote unquote drive the TARDIS. I mean, as he brings up, the fact of the matter is that because I mean, obviously, it's always a concept that like it's a concept that I've always loved. It's like obviously like he ends up bringing up Bill like, oh yeah, I actually stole the TARDIS. I didn't actually buy it. She's like, we're like, really? Wow, that's amazing. Which obviously like in the episode the TARDIS got her own body for an episode. She brought up like, you thought you stole me. It's like you got it wrong, Time Lord. I stole you. You didn't steal a TARDIS. I stole me a Time Lord. So it's always interesting how that works out like that. Like you flip the perspective like that. So to me, it's always a situation where it's not necessarily he drives her. It's like, hey, I go where I want to. Like as he told her, Bill, it's like she takes you somewhere between where you want to be and where you need to be. As we also know, the whole like her making noise situation is that basically he's always left the handbrake on, but he's like, I like that noise. So it's like, it's still a situation where he doesn't properly guide her the right way, I guess would be the more appropriate word rather than drive. So since she's the one more often than not in control, it's like, so I don't know, it was just kind of an interesting thing. And it's like, I'm guessing that's going to be the big story is like what went down. Obviously, we're probably going to work our way backwards. And once again, I brought it up last episode. I'm getting a feeling it might have something to do with, Bill's like mom, like the whole like the doctor taking pictures of her and giving it to Bill. Like I said, that's probably like him later on in the season coming back to do that before him and Bill started this whole adventure. So very interested to see what that's all about. Like what's inside the vault. What is it that he's protecting? What was that something that went down? Obviously, probably what happens later on in the season. Time travel. It's confusing. But at the end of the episode, they are back in London. Granted, once again, not at the particular time that they needed to be. And they happen to step out, and there's an elephant walking in front of them. So, very, very good episode. Bill is easily warming her way into my heart. Like I said, it's just like I said, like every time a companion comes, they just have to kind of one up them, like especially with their introduction to the whole time traveling, and not just time traveling across the stars type of situation, and just everything. Just everyone's got their own approach and perspective on it, and I appreciate those. So she's a very good addition to the show. That's all I'm saying. So I'm very interested to see what goes down next episode and where this story takes us this season. And now moving on to this week's episode of Class. A very big focus of this episode obviously being Ram, basically dealing with everything, basically watching his girlfriend die, and then on top of that, like, because basically he holds this secret, he knows what went down, but he has to pretend like he doesn't know, because it's not like anyone would believe him if he told them what went down. So he has to keep this secret, and it's just like, because everyone's like, oh, the school, and everyone's like, oh, she's missing and everything. Then they like his performance is suffering at school because let's not forget he has a prosthetic leg, so he's slowly trying to get used to that, but it's not working. And for him, it's like, I'm sure for him that was kind of like the one thing he thought he probably could take solace in. It's like football or something. It's like, hey, I can put all my focus and attention like into this, but it's like now I'm slipping and now I'm losing my place on the team and everything, and the coach is kind of being a hard ass on him and everything. And then it's like obviously some of the people he could talk to is obviously Tanya, April, Charlie, not necessarily Quill because of it, not very sociable, but he has them to rely on, but the fact is he's not willing to, because it's like, hey, don't pretend like we're friends. The fact of the matter is, like, we're just people who found ourselves in a very forced to be together in a very messed up situation. We're not pals. We're not heroes here to save the day or something like that. So just leave me alone. So he's like quietly suffering, and they're trying to reach out, but the fact of the matter is, it's just, he's not willing to reach back. Which Tanya brings up a very interesting thing. She's like, well, the fact of the matter is, can you understand, understand what he's been through? It's like, you wouldn't be able to understand what he's been through. And Charlie's like, well, yeah, I did see my entire people, like, massacred in front of me. And then April's kind of like, well, I do share a heart with a genocidal creature. So it's like, oh, we kind of understand where he's coming from. But at the same time, it's like, after experiencing what he experienced, it's understandable why he isn't as willing to kind of be. Obviously, it seems like, I don't know, like, because obviously we don't really get to know Ram that much before everything happened, but it seems like, I don't know if he was always, it doesn't seem like he's necessarily 100% the most, like, open about talking to things, especially when it came to his dad. It seems like he kind of shuts his dad down, at least for a little bit we've seen. I don't know, like, if we kind of get a look in the past, it'll kind of give us a clearer picture, but what ends up happening in this episode, it deals with a dragon, which Ram at first is kind of blowing it off. He's like, no. Like, obviously, he sees, like, a dragon attack, like, one of the, I guess he's, like, the assistant coach of the team and everything. He gets eaten, and then Ram's kind of like, okay, he's freaking out and everything. And he goes, looks in the like little locker / shower room. He's like, okay, I don't see any blood or anything here. And it's like, okay, I must be imagining. He's thinking like his trauma from the previous episode, watching his girlfriend. Is her name Rachel? Once seeing her die and everything in front of him like that, he just keeps having flashes of it, and he thinks that's the main motivation behind this. It's like, I'm not really seeing anything. It's like my brain trying to deal with the trauma that I've been through. That the fact of the matter is creating some kind of monster, because I think like monsters are going to attack me and everything. So he just kind of ignores it. But then it happens again when it was the lunch lady, which is like, that's super sad. That lunch lady was super cool and everything. They're out there like sharing a smoke and everything, which I mean, I highly recommend you don't smoke. I mean, that's just me, right? But nevertheless, she ends up getting murdered in front of him. It's like, dude, again. It's like Ram's just having the roughest day, like roughest time, dude. It's like, that's the third person that brutally died in front of you. Second person has died with like blood splattered all of you. It's like, it makes you wonder, is that going to be a recurring thing throughout the season or not? But also sucks that later on the principal gets eaten too. I did not see that coming. I mean, granted, fortunately for Ram, he wasn't there at that time. I'm granted, Charlie, Tanya, and April were, but still, that sucked for them. But it's like, it's just, I feel like that would have just, it'd be like, okay, it's official. We're basically, from now on throughout the rest of this series, we're basically going to be killing people in front of Ram just to screw him up even more. So, but like, I wasn't expecting the principal to get killed. I thought it's like, oh, obviously he's just probably going to be a recurring character in the background. Obviously, like, the kids are going to have to deal with these things happening, these things coming, finding their way to Coal Hill Academy and dealing with them while also avoiding the principal without, trying to avoid trouble. It's like, oh yeah, the principal, he's going. This show holds no punches. It's not, I mean, to be fair, Doctor Who's not afraid from killing off like side background characters, but in a situation like that, you're like, I thought you'd be like a recurring character. It's like, no, you're dead in the second episode. Wow. So obviously the entire episode is tailored to make you think it's actually the head coach, the one that's a douchebag or whatever. Like I said, I don't even know if his actual position is head coach, but it's like, obviously it's like everything's tailored to him being the bad guy. Obviously every time something's going on, he just happens to be around the corner, and Ram's like, okay, that's very suspicious. You just happen to be around. And it, especially because obviously throughout the episode, we as the audience get to see like he has this sick dragon tattoo that's constantly moving on his body. It's like, okay, so I at first I was wondering, I was like, okay, so is it he's turning into the dragon, or is the dragon leaving his body, coming to life and attacking and killing people? And it's like, what we end up finding out later on is that that's not the case. The dragon on his body got stuck here. Basically, it came through a tear and it landed in his body, and it needs nutrition. I mean, basically, amongst its species, the male has to bring food to the female for her to survive. And in this case, like she's kind of being held hostage on his body, and he's trying to keep her in his body. And so the male dragon is the one that's been going around. It's popped into this world and it started killing people. It's the one that actually killed the principal in front of Tanya, April, and Charlie. And basically it's all been doing this for the sake of getting food for its female partner. But like I said, it's trapped on the teacher's skin. So, I mean, and he's even threatening at one point. It's like, oh, I'm gonna hurt her. It's like, it might not kill her, but it's like, even you can't, talking to the dragon, like, even you can't hurt me, because if you hurt me, you might end up hurting her. So it's like, I guess the entire time he's been, like, I didn't really originally grasp this, but now I'm sitting here thinking about it. I'm assuming that's how it worked. That basically he targeted each specific people that might get in his way. It's like, she needs food. It's like, okay, here. And at this point, he's like, okay, so obviously I want you to eat them. He's like willing to say like, hey, attack them, because they're connected to all this. It's like, they know too much at this point. And it's like, okay, well, sorry, Ram, you were a good pupil on my team and everything, and the rest of you are just innocent kids, but oh well, who cares? So, but then Ram's kind of like, okay, you want to eat me? Go right ahead. But the fact of the matter is, you're going to let him run your life. It's like, yeah, you might lose her. You might eat him or whatever and lose her forever. But wouldn't you rather take the chance that you do something than rather sit back and let him have his way? It's just kind of like one of those situations where it's like, you're thinking you're doing, like, is it better to, it's basically a whole conversation of like, is it better to do something like, in his particular case, is the male dragon better off leaving her in his care, which is like, no, he's not, because obviously the coach is using her as a hostage to be like, yo, do what I want you to. It's like, are you going to be his lackey for the rest of your life for her sake? And it's like, yeah, you might end up having to kill him to get him out of the way, and maybe that might hurt her, but at the very least, are you just going to sit back? There's still a chance you might not, so are you willing to take that gamble? He's like, if you're not, go ahead and kill me, which Ram is like, and Tanya ends up talking about it later on. He's like, you were serious about that, weren't you? It's just because Ram was fine with dying, because it's like, after everything that's happened, he can't live on, like everything that's happened, all that he's lost. And I mean, that's a pretty heavy thing. I mean, he was traumatized. He had the woman he cared about killed right in front of him, and it's just like, and like no one else knows it. He has to keep this secret or else, because it's not like, because I mean, if he told anyone, which I mean, later on he ends up telling his dad, which I was like, I wasn't expecting that. I was like, he's like, I have to tell somebody. And he explains it to his dad. He shows his dad the prosthetic leg. It's like, yeah, that might be able to convince some people, but it's like other people just think you're nuts. It's like, oh, that's a cool prosthetic, but everything else you're telling, crazy. But his dad is like, no, like it's hard to believe what you're saying, son, but it's there. But it's like, Ram needed to tell somebody. He couldn't, because Tanya knows exactly where he's coming from, because Tanya's like, she knows what it's like to have people be like, hey, talk about it, because it's like, her dad died. He was here one day and gone the next. And the fact of the matter is, people wanted her to kind of talk about it, but she didn't want to. So she took her own time. She talked about when she's ready. And so she's like, for Ram, it's like, she's talking to him, trying to keep the conversation casual. It's like, hey, do you need help with your homework and stuff like that? He's like, why aren't you trying to make me talk? Because everyone else in his life, obviously, even Charlie and April, like, hey, talk. And she's like, no, like, you do your own thing. The fact of the matter is, like, I don't want you to talk because I want you to. I want you to talk because you feel that you want to, that you're ready to. Because she's like, because the fact of the matter is, it's like one of those situations where it's like, because she lost her dad, she talks about her siblings and how they bring up her dad and everything. And it's like, just the little stupid memory things that kind of make you laugh and stuff like that. So, when he's ready to kind of talk about it, she's kind of there for him, which obviously he talks to his dad, because I think it's a little easier. Like I said, it's interesting to me because it seemed like, at least from the first episode, and just obviously, it seems like he keeps his dad at a distance. I don't know if that's always been a thing, or was that, obviously recent developments would make him do that, but I'm wondering, was he always like that before? And it seemed like before things really went down in episode 1, maybe that was the case, but maybe not. Like side characters. It's like, no, they're just as important to this story. Their stories matter just as much as someone like Charlie's or Quill's stories. It's like, but, getting back to what I was bringing up earlier, we ended up seeing the teacher being dragged off by the dragon back into the portal world. So what exactly befalls him? Does the dragon completely kill him? Does the dragon, hurt him enough where it's like, hey, you're no longer an obstacle, and I'll just have to find a way to get my wife off of your skin? Or is it like, my wife's trapped in your skin forever, but I will keep her in your dead corpse so that she can still eat or something? Like, I wonder, like, how does that go about? Maybe we'll learn about it later on, but it seems like a type of situation where it's like, that might be just like a one-off, like, you can wonder. I mean, it might be something that's covered much later on, but I mean for now, we'll just kind of leave it at that. So, and they brought up the conversation of like, is that how we're going to handle everything from now on, just letting people kill? Like, that wasn't the best way to handle the situation. Granted, at the time, it's like, they're inexperienced, they don't know what they're doing, but at the very least, it's like, we can't let things go on like that all the time, like letting people die just for the sake of trying to fix these particular situations. We got to find a better way. So, also, side note, I like the whole, like, little subplot of Quill and the robot dude, that basically he was just staring at her the entire time. Even the principal was like, oh, maybe he's actually into you or something like that. She's like, no. It's like, she's trying to explain this to Charlie, but Charlie's not willing to listen and stuff like that. And then later on, when they're dealing with the dragon situation, she's like, oh yeah, I found out he's actually a robot. Oh, none of you care, huh? I guess none of you care. The fact is, I kissed him. And Charlie turns around and is like, wait, you kissed him? It's like, oh, you pay attention to that, don't you? And then later on, it's like, okay, so what do we do about the robot situation? Okay, you're not listening to me anymore. Okay. Because I was curious with that. I had a feeling like, because obviously she was very suspicious of him. It's like, oh, you're always taking notes and stuff like that. And she's like, okay, what do you want from me? And he wrote up a note, and it's like, you. I guess it's like he doesn't know the human language that well. I mean, maybe it's just he doesn't actually have a voice box or something, whatever his case may be. But I love the fact is that him and Quill start, like, moment he said that, she started making out with him and everything. And sadly, she ended up feeding him to the the dragon. She's like, sorry about this, and fed him. And it's like, is there any possibility of rebuilding him or something like that? I forgot what it was, but she did kind of point out like, oh, this is what are you all about? Trying to discover more about him. But it's like, who did send him and for what purpose? Was it like he was sent to keep an eye on her for what reason? Is it because of Charlie? Is it because of her herself? Is it something about her past that drew this robot's attention? Maybe like it was sent by someone. Overall, a very good episode. As I mentioned in last week's episode, I accidentally saw the first 2 episodes early. So this is the last episode I've seen. Going forward, episode 3 on, I'm going into it, watching it week to week like everyone else is. Unless you went out of your way to watch it early in the UK, or if you're just one of those people like, yeah, I can't wait week to week. It's already out in completion. I'll find a way to watch it. So that's all I'm going to say on that subject. It's like, hey, whatever... However you choose to consume a show, you do you. No judgments from me. So, but I'm very interested to see what goes on in coming episodes. Like, especially with these characters that we've already established. Like having to, like, I mean, it's understandable, and I always find it interesting. And like, especially when you put like teenagers into some real situations like this. It's like, this isn't just a regular Doctor Who situation. This is like some pretty deadly, bloody, dangerous type of situation. So, I mean, well, to be fair, it's the exact same thing with a Doctor Who situation, except, minus the blood. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.